Hey, what's going up, guys? And welcome back to my workbench. I'm going to finish up talking about what I was building recently. It's been a while since I did a video. You know, let's face it, my wife was in labor and I have a son now, so we're going to introduce him to the world sometime later. It's a little early. Anyway, so where I last left off before I headed to the hospital with my wife, I forgot, if I can remember correctly, I was finishing up painting. I don't even remember where I last left off, but I can tell you what I did finish up on. I did finish up the kit itself. Matter of fact, here it is right here, the mother of all zeros. This looks kind of weird, because I'm used to seeing a zero with 3 props, not 2. But once again, this is the prototype. I gave the flat coat on it. I was very careful in finishing and assembling. I snapped this piece off a few times. Unfortunately, I'm very, how can I put it, ham-handed, you know? I'm not very good with my hands, but I was very careful. Snapped the pitted tube again a few more times on this. But yet I was able to paint what I had to paint on this itself. Anyway, so as for the kit itself, I finished up everything I had to finish up. Gave this a flat coat, and I didn't want it to be a dead flat, so what I did was after it dried, I buffed it a little bit to give more of a slight sheen to it, which is what should be expected. I also stripped the paint and the clear coat off of the canopy here and repainted it again. Still not that good, but it looked better than it did before. Still not an easy task. Unfortunately, the scribing on the clear parts was not that great. I guess after years of being molded so many times, it's starting to show its age. Hasegawa, you got to catch up on that, clean it up a little bit. But overall, but the kit itself, it's in good shape. Everything went together well. Let's see what else. Decals were really good, as I mentioned before. And after I was done putting the flat coat, adding the little bitty parts like the propeller, the landing gear, adding the wire for the antenna, excuse me for a moment, I never glued this on with good reason. I also did the landing gear up. This is a little more complicated than any of your other Zero kits. I had to install the hinges in here somewhere. You might be able to see them for these doors. And I also had to install the smaller doors that were part of the landing gear, the main gear doors. And those were taken care of. Everything else came out very good on this. A lot better than I expected. Oh, that's what I was going to say. The landing lights I did paint with Tamiya Clear. You might be able to see them. You might not. You might be able to see them on the Hinamaru, or the meatball as it's called. This is the port side, red, green. I did my usual dots with the Tamiya acrylic. I was going to use silver initially and then go over clear coat, but, well, clear red, clear green, but I was able to get away with it with just as such because it's dark enough and they're small enough. The wingtips were clear though. They were glued separately. They were clear parts, so I just glued them on and then put the red and green. I also did the tail here. This is actually a silver. You know, some people tell you white, some people tell you something else. I usually use silver for anything that's not colored for landing lights. That should be that for the... Oh, and I also put the guns in, which I painted semi-gloss black. Since they're only a prototype, I didn't want to make it look like they were used. You can tell in here, like little dot, they're like little inserts. They were a pain in the butt to get in, but once they were in, not a problem. Everything else though, it's done. And now my opinion on the Hasegawa kits. Since I built the prototype, this was really, and there was very little research about it. At least I had to follow the instructions, so I was flying blind. But the kit, it's a very good kit. Not much filling and sanding. It's a little work. I mean, it's good because Hasegawa intended this to be 1/48 scale for the word go, and so it goes together well. It's simple. It's easy. There's enough to detail to keep you busy. If you do not like the detail, you can always get out. There's plenty of aftermarket parts for the Zero kits. We're talking like aftermarket engine, photo etch parts, resin parts, white metal landing gear, and I'm sure there's plenty others. Edward makes photo etch parts for the entire series from soup to nuts, and if you're not sure, you can always use earlier sets, for, like say for the prototype, you can always use A6M2 with 2A, 2B photo etch. Same thing with their later edition A6M8. You can always use an A6M5, 5A, B, or C photo etch parts from Edward. There's also, for resin cockpits. Cutting Edge or Meteor Productions used to be around. They're not available, but you can still find them on the internet if you can. CMK, Aries, sure Medallion Models made one, whoever they are. But there's plenty of aftermarket parts available. But I don't think you really need them if you're just going to be making a shelf sitter, because they're really nice kits in their own right. They're a little expensive, but they're well worth the money. The engineering's good. Like I said, I had very little trouble filling and sanding. A couple gaps here and there. I mostly use a Tamiya Surface Primer, which I put somewhere. I cleaned up my mess at my back because I don't have a bench, but I'm going to make sure I have maximum walking, because this is going to be my work area from this point on. But back to the kit itself. It's well researched. However, there are some drawbacks, mostly in the instructions. They tell you to use Gun Sangyo or GSI Krios, as it's now known. You can't find those paints here in the States anymore, in the United States, like you used to. They stopped selling them sometime in like 2010 to the United States, which is kind of a bummer. I keep hoping they will. But they do have Mr. Color from Gun Sangyo, if you can find them. They're still a pain in the butt to find, but they're very difficult to use. It's an acrylic lacquer, not acrylic as in water-based. I do recommend being careful with them. Just keep them strictly for airbrushing, from what I've heard, because they can eat through the plastic. Kind of like the old Floquil paints that were used. They use xylene instead of the usual petroleum distillates or whatever, like testers would use. So you got to be careful with them. If you're still not sure, use a primer, like I did. Everything else, though, it's a great kit. Like you said, this is a great kit. Expect to pay a little bit more, depending on where you order it from. If you get it at your local hobby shop, if there is any, or mail order hobby shops, it's going to cost anywhere between $30 to $40. And since this is the mother of all Zero prototypes, it might cost $5 more. But I do recommend this. Spare parts, if there is any, keep them. Because they will, if you're going to be building more of the Hasegawa Zeros, they will come in handy in case you screw up, in case there's something you want to touch back on, you want to make a separate engine, like it shows, hey, this is what it looks like, gives you a demonstration. I do recommend keeping the spare parts, each and every one of them. Pay attention to the instructions. I cannot stress that enough, because sometimes it can get very confusing. Fortunately, Hasegawa keys the parts in certain, like A1, A2, B, Z, whatever. Make sure you do your research carefully. I think that's about it. And last but not least, if you have like a kid or a nephew, like my uncle passed on to me, and he's getting better, let him give this a try. Make sure, tell him 3 key things: patience, slow and steady wins race, and do your research. I cannot stress this enough. Like you said, unfortunately, the prototype, and I give you the overall color of it, I was just guessing it, as you can see here, so I was guessing it was from the Tamiya acrylic line. Some people may try to find an actual picture or do more, or try something close to it. So I do recommend that you do your research very carefully. But kit itself, it's good. It really is good. Next time, I'm going to be taking a break from building the Zeros, because one, I don't have the space for it. I don't have the shelves. I got the space, I just don't have the shelves. And second, since my son is born, we got a nursery, and we're going to work on a couple things. I may build a couple World War II U.S. prop jobs, which I'll explain in future videos, but I do recommend the Zero series from Hasegawa, because if you're lucky, you can find every little sub-variant. I actually found a couple things I didn't know existed, like the Night Fighter variant. Really isn't a night fighter, because when you think of night fighter, you think of German radar, U.S. radar, British. Case in point, Messerschmitt 110 from Germany, the P-61 for the United States, or the Beaufighter, for example, or the Mosquito, that they were fitted with radar. No, they didn't have that with the Japanese. It's just a gun, and you just shot, you spray and pray, as the joke would go. And you shot and you hope you got the target. But I wouldn't put it past them, but we will save that for another day. But Hasegawa covers every little variant. However, most of them were done in limited runs or limited batches, like the prototype. I actually have a couple special edition Zeros for specific variants that are specific for it, and they were not cheap. Like I said, I paid a lot. I shouldn't say a lot. It's not as expensive to my Zero kit, new mold Zero kits, but it wasn't cheap because they were just limited runs or special edition runs. That's how Hasegawa's been getting around with their kits lately, their molds lately. On one half, it doesn't put a strain on the molds, but on the other half, it's a pain in the butt because you want a standard release, and sometimes the markings that they provide for their editions are not what you want. But what can you do? It's Hasegawa. As I said before, I highly recommend this. So, this is what I got for now. I will be talking to you guys again soon. Happy modeling, take it easy, and we'll see what happens from here. Have fun.